here recently, Myelin put out this video right here, and I want us to watch it, guys. It's called Bungie Responds to RETCON Concerns and Lightfall Criticism. Let me do this because there may be some people in here that don't know what RETCON is. RETCON, in film, television series, or other fictional work, a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events, typically used to facilitate a dramatic plot shift or account for an inconsistency. Revive, so an aspect of fictional work retrospectively, typically by introducing a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events. Now, let's let Myelin explain this.
Welcome back to episode 2 of Myelin's Moaning Minute, where I talk about what's happening in the community or what's happening at Bungie. I don't want to say drama farming, but there has been some drama going on again around the topic of retcons, and just so happens that Bungie's narrative team had a round table with games media, and they actually brought up the topic of retcon. So we do have Bungie's perspective on the community's perspective of retcons and people being generally unhappy with the direction of the story. We also have a lot of commentary on Lightfall and the players' reaction to Lightfall and Bungie's response to that. So we're going to go over that too. If this is not your kind of video, that's okay. That's fine. I've got plenty of other content throughout the week. I've just uploaded a lore game show with Datto, Travel Danielle, and Leopard. So go watch that. That's fine. It happened on Twitch too. People were like, I'm not going to be here. I'm over it. I just want to enjoy my game and be done with it. I get it, right? But at the same time, I do think I can add to this conversation and hopefully not be so ranty, but still give reasonable criticism to Bungie, to Lightfall, and the direction of the story. So let's have at it. Right, let's start with retcons. PC Gamer put some information from the round table with the narrative team, and specifically it related to the Unveiling Lorebook. Just in case you are not up to speed, essentially the cutscene with the origins of the Witness mentioned the Traveler as the Gardener. And the Gardener is a very specific word that is used in the Unveiling Lorebook. And it essentially is like the creation story of the universe. So it made a lot of people then go, oh, the Witness is related to this in some way. And so one interpretation of that is that the Unveiling Lorebook is made up by the Witness. And that has some people upset saying, oh, this is a retcon. So this is what they said in the PC Gamer article. Welcome to the problem that all Bible scholars have been trying to figure out, or may not have happened, and lining that up to actual historical events. Says senior narrative designer Robert Brooks. Unveiling is a parable. It is effectively a religious text, and how much of that is propaganda and how much of that is myth, how much of that is fact, is deeply unclear in the nature of the text. Brooks notes that when Unveiling first dropped, players did take it as literal gospel truth. Players believed it to be 100% fact. There was a literal garden, there was a literal gardener, there was a literal winnower. And now it's starting to become clear that those may not actually be just concrete ideas, but metaphors or things that are far less concrete and clear. And as we get closer into the final shape, more answers on that will start coming up. And the final shape, of course, will have a lot of answers about the nature of those conflicts. Brooks refused to offer any more hints on how this will all resolve, except for this. The contradictory nature has always kind of been intentional. Whatever the Witness says, maybe don't trust it. They're just saying that, yeah, this creation story was essentially created by the Witness, and some of it could be true and some of it might not be true. So, should we be mad about that? Let me give you my thoughts on retcons. I think there is a scale. This is my retcon scale. This is a scale for retcons. And at one end is something like the Witch Queen. I have no issues with what they did with Witch Queen. I thought it was fantastic. They took the Books of Sorrow and everything written in the Books of Sorrow and they just twisted it a little bit and they made a new story from it. For those unfamiliar, the Books of Sorrows talk about a syzygy, a god wave that forced the proto-hive to make a pact with the worm gods, and this sort of leads into the hive's history of conquest. In Witch Queen, they revealed that that was fabricated by the Witness, so the Witness essentially encouraged the hive down this path. I thought that was fine. I thought it was very respectful for what was written, and didn't contradict it, but just twisted it a little bit.
Which, by the way, went hand in hand with Savathun herself. You know, why Savathun was against the Witness. And also, just her demeanor in itself, it made sense that there was that she would be the one to actually uncover that deception, right?
And, you know, on the retcon scale, I don't really feel like it's a retcon. It's an evolution of the story. Oppositely, I think at the other end of the scale, I think is something like, you remember way back with Warmind? Do you remember when they introduced this, is it just called Season of the Warmind? And prior to that season, all the lore was essentially saying that there were multiple Warminds. They like looked after a planet each. There were these planetary defense systems. And then that season came along and they said, actually, there's only one Warmind. It's Rasputin, and all the rest are AI. That to me feels very different on the retcon scale. It feels like it is rewriting the lore to suit whatever story they want to tell. It's not it's almost contradicting what was already written and rewriting it into something else to suit a season. Now, I 100% understand the need to be able to change stuff. I did work at Bungie. I was contracted by Bungie to help out on the anthology project. These bad boys. Volumes 1, 2, and 3. I curated the lore on this, and I had those conversations with Bungie at that time, because when these books were done, I was like, there's a lot of stuff in here that contradicts. Like, the Warminds would have been one of them. Like, hey, now we know there's only one Warmind. Like, are we going to change this stuff or leave it? And just to be really clear, like, I mainly worked with the products team, and if I had questions like that, it would be sent off to narrative, and they would give like an answer back. And the answer was always like, yeah, it's perspective. Like, there can be things wrong. Like, it's written from different characters' perspectives in the lore, and like, it doesn't matter that some things might say there's multiple Warminds and some things don't. Like, that's the way it is. Like, we're not changing stuff now that we have more information. Like, it's all about, you know, perspective and who's writing the lore entry, and these things exist in the game, and there can be inaccuracies in that lore, and that's okay. So I definitely understand the function of being able to change a story, and you don't really want to pigeonhole your writers into doing a certain thing. You want to give them a little bit of freedom, and you need to be able to change and adapt and tell a good story as you progress in a live service game. So they are 100% necessary. However, I do think on the retcon scale, with examples like Witch Queen, I think they bend the lore a little bit. They don't contradict or invalidate it, and they evolve the story. And I feel like the example with the Warmind, for me, and this is a very gut reaction, is very subjective, it feels like it invalidates what's previously been written. And I think one of the things that defines what happens here is the justification for it. If Bungie just responds with, oh, it's just all lies, it's just all perspective, like, don't believe it, for me, that really pushes it down to this end of my retcon scale. If Bungie provides like a cohesive reason for the change in story, it pushes it up the other end. And, you know, when it came to the Books of Sorrow and the Witch Queen and the Witness, it was that the Witness wanted to claim the hive before the Traveler did. And so it made up this story. And I think the issue I have with Unveiling is we don't really have any other reason for the Witness to be just making up the story. Like, why did the Witness give us this creation story? And then when Bungie responds with, oh, it's just, you know, it's like a Bible. It's just perspective. Like, we don't know what actually happened in history. We don't know what the truth is. We don't know anything. And my gut reaction to that is it invalidates a lot of previous lore, and it becomes hard to be motivated to read lore books if that's always the response. So Like, why should I read another lore book if in another 2 expansions, it's going to be revealed it's also a lie and a perspective? I know that's very like an emotional response to that, but I also do think that's where a lot of people are with the current story with Lightfall and the current story in the seasons. I think you also have to consider this in the perspective of Lightfall and everything that happened in there. And there were a bunch of things that happened in Lightfall that also didn't really make sense. We had the whole Black Garden narrative where the Vex created the Black Heart. And we've been told for years that they didn't know what the Black Heart was. And they just worshipped it because it was this darkness power. And we know the Vex can't simulate the light or the dark. And they worked out the best thing to do was to pray to it, essentially. Because it was so unknown to them. And the reason the Vex don't win is because they can't simulate the light or the dark. And then Lightfall comes down and says, actually, one of them did create the Black Heart.
What?
And it was a replica of the Veil. Which, by the way, you don't know what the Veil is, and you don't know what the Black Heart is in the Black Garden. The whole ending of Lightfall, when you get your Kvostov out and you try to shoot your ghost, the whole paracausal bullet has just been like something that's been on and off in Destiny's story and lore for so long now. Originally, it didn't matter. We had Elixni take out Guardians in way back when they sieged the city. We had warlords kill ghosts with shotguns without any sort of paracausality. Then they introduced in Forsaken that you needed paracausal bullets, and they doubled down on it when they tried to shoot Zavala's ghost. And then we're back to just like shooting regular Kvostov M4 bullets at our ghost, right? So there are a number of things that happen in Lightfall, and I think when you put the Unveiling lore book in that context as well, people are sort of moving down the retcon scale towards you're just kind of rewriting and doing a soft reset of the lore. And that is honestly my gut reaction to Lightfall, is they wanted to do a soft reset. They wanted anybody to be able to play Lightfall and technically understand what's going on. In reality, anyone could play Lightfall and be equally confused. It didn't matter if you had read 8 years of lore or you were a brand new player. None of that lore really helped you work out Lightfall.
Yeah, no, and not only that, it just wasn't good. When I see retcon or rewriting, guys, in my opinion, it's because you can't think your way out of this narratively. It's like what we talked about here recently about time travel. It's like, okay, we've exhausted all narrative avenues. What can we do? How do we get out of this situation? Time travel. Let's just throw time travel in there. But retcon, to me, this is a big issue because it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth, especially for my lore guys, where you feel like you do have a grasp on the lore of Destiny. And then you're like, wait, okay, that's not true. And then, all right, how many other things fall under that umbrella of perspective? That's a problem.
And I do honestly think that was the intention. And then it's the beginning of the Final Shape saga, and then each season's going to progress that story up to the finale of the Final Shape. And that's kind of what they confirmed in this roundtable too. So in all the other articles, we kind of got that information. So in the Games Radar article, they talked about Lightfall being a narrative experiment to increase engagement for each subsequent season leading up to Final Shape. So here's the quote. Bungie leads addressed criticism of Lightfall's story and explained that the expansion was partly a narrative experiment to set up more engaging seasons for the current year. These are some of the most serialized and interconnected seasons we've ever done, senior narrative designer Robert Brooks adds. I don't think people will dispute if the seasons are really good and really cohesive leading up to Final Shape. And if it keeps adding to the story of the Veil and the Witness and the Portal, I think that's all fine. I think what people dispute is that it feels like Final Shape is a bubble that starts at Lightfall. And rather than be the end of the Light vs. Dark saga that started 8-9 years ago, it feels like we're sort of starting again with Lightfall and then 4 seasons and then finishing with Final Shape. They go on to say that things were left intentionally unresolved. So here's the quote. There's a lot of narrative threads that were left very intentionally unresolved to dig into and expand upon and feel the impact of, Brooks continued. And then from 22 and 23 onwards, as in the seasons, it's the ramp up and lead into the dive into the final shape. It's a very different shape than what we're used to some of the narrative arcs. It might be done in a different way, and that's very intentional. What they're talking about is what they previously do is an expansion is usually the conclusion. Like how Witch Queen was a conclusion to the previous seasons. It was a lead up to Witch Queen and then you got the expansion, which I think everyone actually enjoyed. Once again, I don't think people dispute having seasons lead up to an expansion. I think they dispute Lightfall not really giving any information, adding a big MacGuffin being the Veil, not explaining what it is, and expecting players to then pay for multiple seasons to get answers. And I think that's the bit that kind of gets me from like a consumer point of view is it's very intentional that each season's going to answer those questions in the final in Lightfall. So you have to buy those seasons to know what's going on. And then you have to buy Final Shape to get a completion to this story. I think what makes that even worse is if you imagine in a year's time where those seasons are sunset, like what does Lightfall then look like? If we get all the lead up and all the if all the seasons explain the Veil from Lightfall and then those seasons get sunset as they do, how does Lightfall look as a singular product? It's a mess. They also talked about this trail of breadcrumbs and drip-fed content, I guess, saying, he says this trail of breadcrumbs is a way we're experimenting with new narrative delivery systems to tell different kinds of stories and shake things up a bit from what people have been expecting. I don't know how true that is. I think everyone expects breadcrumbs.
I mean, that's pretty much what we've been getting. I think this is just bullshit. This whole narrative experiment, I think it's just bullshit. There is a way to tell a story. And look, I'm not the best storyteller, you know what I mean? I make up some bullshit for my kid, but there is a way to tell a story where you could have actually, I mean, the entire Lightfall campaign could have been told so much better. We didn't have to have superb clarity on what the Veil was. I think the most annoying thing about the entire Veil situation on what the hell the Veil was that no one was really asking what the Veil was, you know? And as in the characters, our character, we're just showing up, just blasting. And us as the player actually playing the game are like, wait, why is this happening? You know, we have these questions seeping into our mind. And so this whole like Bungie's, yes, you can tune in every single week right now and get a small snip of what the Veil is, who is this Sundaresh and all those audio clips. But dude, the vast majority of people are not going to do that. You have an annual expansion, which is when the majority of people are playing your game. To me, that makes the most sense to narratively involve everyone. And so the throwing this, we're trying something differently, we're experimenting. No, it's because it was, in my opinion, it was just weakly told to begin with. And you've kind of, I guess, either exhausted all of the narrative avenues or you just were like, we're just going to drip feed this. This is true drip feed. And like for whatever reason it may be, you know, get us to buy the seasons and whatnot. Seasons don't have to be narratively tied to the annual expansion. You know, to me, you could still have a great season. It has lore implications, but it does not tie directly to the main annual expansion storyline. I don't think anyone thought Season of the Plunder just had some like just major narrative implications from Witch Queen to Lightfall. There, you know, lore people, deep lore people definitely picked up things from Plunder, but you didn't leave Witch Queen with a whole bunch of unanswered questions. And you're like, all right, I have to wait until Season of the Plunder to get these answers. All right, let me let Myelin keep going.
And drip-fed content. Personally, I actually don't mind the weekly stories. I like them, But, you know, some people like to binge watch their Netflix and some people like to tune in weekly. It's a very personal preference. So I don't think that's anything new. I think what's new about it is we had an expansion that just posed all the questions, and then you got to tune in each week of the season to work out what happens. What I would have liked to see in Lightfall was the explanation of this hidden city of Neomuna. All the stuff we're actually getting now about Myelin and the Veil. Explanation about the creation of Cloud Striders. And I know some of this is in the background lore, but it should have been front and center. Like, that was the interesting thing about Neomuna and the discovery of Neomuna. And the fact that it's got essentially advanced Siva there, which we haven't even spoken about yet on the channel, by the way. They have advanced Siva there. And instead we got introduced to the concept of the Veil and essentially a side quest of like a training montage of Strand. Okay, so in the press start article, I think it summarizes what they were trying to achieve for Lightfall pretty nicely. And it says this: in a lot of previous releases, the seasons ramp up to a major expansion, which is kind of like the end of that story. The next set of seasons starts a new one. We saw this with Beyond Light and Witch Queen, right? Lightfall is a bit of a different experience in that it isn't just another ramp up, it's a bridge. There's the fallout, the deconstruction of events that happened, and the way the characters react to it. Each season will hand off the next more immediately than before. We want it to be the same when we hand off the final shape into what comes next. And so to kind of wrap this up, I think when you have the context of Lightfall being this experiment, and it obviously not really working, because I would think it's pretty fair to say that the majority of Destiny players didn't like the story of Lightfall, I think people are more critical of the story. And when you get that retcon scale, just because people are unhappy, they're going to be down towards the end of, oh, you're just rewriting this. And I kind of get it, and I kind of feel like it's reasonable to think that way because of how a Lightfall was crafted and delivered. Okay, thanks for coming to...
Okay, the other issue with retconning too, by the way, guys, is the recent... Here's the other thing. When you get into the, okay, is it perspective? Is it lies on the retcon scale? Well, hell, then we start to ask ourselves, what's the most recent cutscene we saw where it shows us the origin of the Witness? It shows them interacting with the Traveler, them building their civilization, them getting the Veil, the Traveler peacing out. Is that a lie? What's actually supposed to be true? Like, if you're like, Mr. Narrative Team, there's some inconsistencies here. Oh, it's because it's about perspective, or actually it's deception. Okay, where do we draw that line? Are the cutscenes? Are we to even believe that? And I feel like Savathun did it so good, because like in her dialogue with us, she would be like two truths and a lie. And, you know, she would give you the three things, right? And you'd be like, damn, all three of these sound way out there. And then as the seasons progress, you saw these things unfold. And you were like, holy shit, she was right. That was the truth. That one thing that sounded way out in left field was a truth. So I'm having an issue with the retcon side of things, because when you show us cutscenes, or when you sell lore books, and Myelin knows way more about this, Bife knows way more about this, but just me looking at it from the surface, I have a problem with it, because it's like, all right, what do we believe? Where do we draw the line here? You know, is it the cutscenes? When you load up, you know, stuff in the lore, and again, things are quoted in the lore, so maybe that's why, but like, it's got me questioning cutscenes that are provided by Bungie. Like, is this actual truth? I agree with Myelin on this stuff, and more so than that, whatever. Like, we're offering solutions about Lightfall's narrative, and you know, I'm not even gonna go to like the extent of saying like what should have been done. I think more girth is always better. You know, adding more depth. I've mentioned it. I gave the example in yesterday's video where it's like, you know, when you kill off a character like Rohan, like actually having a true bond and like learning about Neomuna, you know, that I feel like that would have been step one. I mean, we show up to this really dope ass city and we're like, you know, we're getting bits and pieces, but you have to like really be paying attention to like just random ass dialogue to even know what the hell's going on. And then on top of that, you know, the whole scene there with Rohan, that one really let me down because it's like, I know Bungie's holding the sign up saying cry, feel emotion. And it's like, I feel nothing. But we'll see what ends up shaking out. My question to you guys, are you liking our seasons being beefier on the narrative side? That's really it. Would you rather annual expansions being front-loaded narratively, the seasons just kind of picking up lore pieces here and there? I feel like, why not both? You know, I feel like Bungie's presenting us with you can only have one or the other. You can only have all the answers in an annual expansion, but you have nothing for the seasons, or you can only have minimum answers in an annual expansion and everything have to be spread out over a year. I feel like with the amount of lore that's in Destiny, there is so much to talk about. There's so much to dive into that I feel like you could have the best of both worlds. You could still have narratively driven seasons, even if it's not tied directly to the narrative that's happening right then and there, but just like, you know, a season on Neomuna itself and its origin, or what Myelin was just talking about, souped up Siva. Just stuff, and maybe we may end up getting that, but just stuff like that is okay without having to sacrifice the narrative that we had in Lightfall.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.